Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Martin Dreyfus Show. Welcome back to the second part of my thoughts on the Russia Ukraine war. Now, a lot has happened since the last time we've talked. I want to do this about every 25 parts just to give a lot of information to talk about each part, but not too much to bore you. So, as we've developed from the last time we've talked, the biggest changes has been the developments in the UN, the developments in the military support for Ukraine, as well as the Russian convoy, along with a couple fallen Russian cities. So let's start with the progression of the actual war. The biggest news that we've been talking about since the second or third day of this war was a 40-mile convoy right outside of Kiev. It had been right outside of Kiev for days, kind of waiting on certain talks and agreements. And once the UN and the talks went south, the thought was that this convoy was going to move into Kiev and kind of obliterate the city. However, they started to run out of gas. They had supply issues, and overall, this convoy seemed to be stalled. And it still is stalled, to my knowledge. So it's allowed for the Ukrainian military to kind of bombard it with drones, to prepare how to assault the convoy, and to better defend Kiev with more longer preparation, getting rid of citizens, setting up defenses, getting more supplies, and really giving them an opportunity to actually defend their capital. However, just because that convoy stalled and Kiev is doing well doesn't mean the rest of Russia, or I'm sorry, Ukraine is doing well. We see Mariupol falling. We see Kherson has fallen. We saw that they got to the largest nuclear plant in Europe. And Zelensky did declare nuclear terrorism by them shelling it. But regardless, we see Russian troops in many parts of Ukraine finally advancing. As we kind of look at the map of Ukraine, we see how it makes sense. They got past the Donbass region into the next city. They obviously had Crimea, so then they went to Mariupol, and kind of slowly moving in. And although the world continues to say Russia's behind schedule, they're still conquering the country. It might not have been a weak obliteration, call it Russia, and we're all done. But they are still getting through the city. We still see the shelling of citizens. We still see the bombing of residential areas. We see airports being taken over. It's a war. It's not a one-sided affair either way. And yes, Ukraine is putting up a good fight, but Russia is still doing their part. Um, Another huge thing we saw that has developed over the past 5 days was the UN and their approach to Ukraine. Obviously, we saw the vote, which was a big deal with the standing ovation, all that. But when you really get into the nitty gritty, didn't mean much. The resolution kind of just established or solidified what most of the world was already doing: economic sanctions and just condemning the assault on Ukraine. It didn't say we were going to provide military support or really step in any other way. It was more like, hey, Putin, the world doesn't like what you're doing. You should stop. Even though he probably already knows that. I mean, he obviously doesn't care. He's arresting his own citizens, and that's another huge part of this. Even his own citizens aren't for the war. And as they protest in the streets and they're arrested, it's the same thing. He's not trying to listen to anyone else's opinion. He believes Ukraine is a part of Russia, and based on his truth, he is going to do whatever it takes. Um, we've obviously seen the development of nuclear threats from Russia. The term bear backed into a corner with Putin is really what stuck out for me, because if you think about it, if six dudes have shotguns and they've trapped a bear into a corner, odds are the bear doesn't lay down and whimper. The bear's probably going to fight back and try. And although that bear's going to die, he's probably going to get one, two, or three because you tried to pin him down. You didn't just take him out. And by pinning down Putin, you are pinning down one of the biggest nuclear forces rulers. The guy who puts in the commands to press the button. You're putting him in a corner. And it's really dangerous in doing so, because if he thinks it's his end, his country's gone because his people aren't his people anymore, his mental earth is shattering, we don't know what he's going to do to the physical earth. And that's very, very scary, very, very dangerous. Um, so, as we've seen the UN develop, as we've seen Russia's escalation develop, as we've seen President Zelensky still speak and solidify his country, as we've seen this whole time, the biggest breaking news for me is going to be how the world escalates in the military support for Ukraine. Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the United States of America, came out essentially saying Ukraine's going to win by any means necessary. It's going to be a tough, dirty war, but Ukraine is going to prevail. And that's right after the U.S. said that we're going to send fighter jets to Ukraine. Now, after this video, we're going to do a lot more videos on what that actually means and the level of jets, how that's going to play into the war. But it really is starting to tiptoe the line of active military support. And Putin said active military support essentially equals nuclear war. So as we reach those points, I would assume the world has a plan in place to either get rid of Putin or something, because these baby steps are really tiptoeing the line of what the world was staying away from for the past 9-10 days. So those are the developing stories. My overall opinion still is, I obviously want Ukraine to win. If we're betting on a sports team in some sick, disgusting world, I want Ukraine to win, of course. The best case scenario is a ceasefire, and it's like, dang, that just happened, and we move on, of course. But my truth and my reality as I'm seeing it is this escalates, and the world's going to step in ways that we don't want them to. And at the end of the day, in doing so, we may have grander issues. We may have a World War III that we were all trying to avoid. So it leads me to the same point I've been making this entire time is, as citizens of the world, we've got to stop letting the small amounts of people control the future of everybody. There's a better way to run the world, and that's unified as a whole and putting the best scientists, the best doctors, the best lawyers, maybe not lawyers, but the best everything, psychologists, at the head of a department to meet and decide where we should go. We don't need war against each other. We're all humans. We all want the best for each other and our descendants. So we just got to put these small differences aside. Recognize there's going to be differences no matter what. No matter if we were all Christian, all Islamic, all white, all black, there'll still be differences. So we got to accept the fact that there's differences in those things too, and just allow us to progress. We can be a multi-planetary species. We can save the world. We can do all of these things if we do it together. But we got to stop letting these people make these decisions that are impacting us so drastically. So as Ukraine-Russia develops, I just wanted to give you a quick little snippet. The news isn't as fast and hard coming as it was in the first few days. It's going to slow down. So these 25 parts might go to every 30, 40 parts, and more so as I see fit, just because we're going to be watching the same story develop over a few days rather than 30 breaking news stories in 2 days. So thank you guys for tuning into the Martin Dreyfuss Show. It means the world to me. You guys have given me more support in a week than I could have ever asked for, and I look forward to keep learning and providing great breaking news and content for you. Comment what you want to see. If you want to see anything different, you want to see me cover any other kinds of stories, I would love to talk about anything. I love to talk about politics. I love to talk about this war stuff. I love to talk about sports, spirituality, whatever you would like to see. Comment it down below if you're interested, and thank you for watching.